Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is the first session of the day on the what we're calling the intermediate stream of the Postal History Symposium. And we're very pleased today to welcome Phil Visser, who's going to be speaking about small town postal history and its rewards. And just to give you a little bit of background about Phil before we get underway, Phil has a professional background in the marine world. He was working as a navigation officer and ship's captain before he transitioned into a position of being professor for navigation. His stamp collecting career started at an early age, under the age of 10, but his dedication to the hobby has increased over the last 20 years to include postal history, but he still likes to keep an eye on the stamps themselves. He's a member of the RPSC, of BNAPS, the PHSC, and he's recently joined the Philatelic Specialist Society of Canada. So, Phil, I'm going to get ready to turn things over to you. I'm going to stop that screen share and we'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks very much, Bruce, for the introduction, and it's nice to see those that are present. And I hope that you find that this is going to be a little bit stimulating. So I'm going to just start share screen here, and I'll see if my computer will allow me to go full screen here. Yeah, hey, it's amazing, folks. So yeah, it's called Owen Sound Fancy Cancels by myself, Phil Visser. And I don't know, it really is a study into the locally produced obliterators to satisfy post office requirements. Lumping the cancels together makes a story just by connecting the dots. And that's why I chose that background there, all the dots, just connecting the dots. And it will reveal something unexpected, things that I didn't know. And even last night, I found something else new. And so I'll just mention that as I go through the slides. So the agenda for today is right here. Start off with an introduction. Why fancy cancels? You may not know. In Owen Sound, we had three types of fancy cancels: the radial, the crossroads, and the intersecting lines. And then there's that miscellaneous. That's something that just is undefined. And then at the end, we'll have a few conclusions. And I'd just like to say, if anybody has questions, just throw them into the question and answer, and we'll get that at the end. I'm supposed to be on here for about 20 to 25 minutes, and I don't know if I'm going to quite make that length, but here we go. So welcome to Owen Sound. This is a postcard that was made in the 1960s, just giving you an aerial view of the city. It's a city now. It was a town at the time of the fancy cancels. And this side is the east side of the city. The dividing line is this wonderful river called the Sydenham River. We are located at the bottom of Owen Sound, which is part of Georgian Bay. And Georgian Bay is connecting to Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, all at the same water level. There are several identifiable buildings that I can say, and this one right here, that was the former City Hall and Fire Department. And that building is gone. It experienced, of all things, a fire and burnt down in the late 1960s. So the west side of town is this treed area, and there's lots of more housing there. This factory here, Black Clawson and Kennedy, is gone. So if anybody may be familiar with the city, there's been lots of changes since this postcard came out. So an introduction, just a little bit about the background of Owen Sound and on Georgian Bay. So I'd just like to mention that the natives were here first, and they lived here, and it was the Huron Confederacy that were established here with several tribes closely related to each other. And according to their oral traditions, the first European that they saw here was Samuel Champlain in 1615. And that date, by the way, is based on Champlain's writings, who spoke about visiting these coastal regions. In itself, our area opened up for European settlement by Treaty 45, which was signed in 1836, which opened up the Grey counties and Simcoe counties, as well as the Manitoulin Island. Later, in 1854, Treaty 72 opened up the Bruce Peninsula to European settlement. And then finally, Owen Sound itself as a town, it started in 1840 with the arrival of the Crown land agent, a gentleman by the name of Mr. John Telfer. And he's the one that organized the city. And there was another gentleman, Charles Rankin, who was the surveyor, and they worked closely together. So, an introduction to fancy castles. How did they come into existence? You may not know, but I'll just go briefly through this. Well, first of all, prior to 1867, we were a British colony under the auspices of the British or UK Post Office. And so there's all kinds of rules and regulations for the mail that was generated over in London, England. But with Confederation, we had the need for our own post offices. And so the Postmaster General here in Canada then had to establish rules and regulations. The Post Office Act was first, and then under that he sent out a document called the General Regulations for the Guidance of the Offices and Other Persons Employed in the Postal Service of the Dominion of Canada. Well, that's a mouthful. This document came out in March of 1868. And it takes time for things to move because as you will know, road travel is not like it is today, even if we have complaints. So section 50 of that document gives this statement. After the dated stamp has been affixed to the letter, parcel, or packet, the postage stamps which may be thereon should be carefully obliterated with the instrument supplied for that purpose. So the key word was supplied. The next reference I'm going to make is the book by Arfken, Canada's Small Queen Era from 1870 to 1897. And on page 421, Arfken writes, Canadian postmasters found that their need for cancelling devices outstripped the supply. One popular solution was to carve cancelling devices from cork or wood. Here, the postmaster's creative tendencies went, and we have hundreds of fancy cancellations. And by the way, if anybody has looked at that or is interested in this topic, the go-to reference is that from Dave Lascelles, who has this catalog, Fancy Cancels on Canadian Stamps, the 3rd edition. And there's more than 1,000 in there. Any new cancellation was automatically reported to the other post office by that next mail. So these fancy cancels are most common during the period 1875 to 1886. So there's some few popular assumptions then about fancy cancels, that they're made from cork or wood. Well, that's not necessarily true, but just staying on that, just assuming that it was made out of cork, what kind of cork was it? Well, how about a bottle top from a medicine bottle, or if you're so inclined, from an alcoholic beverage? And the postmaster and or designate would carve a design in it and use it to obliterate the stamps. Wood, the same idea. For instance, you could cut off a broom handle and you would have a flat end, and you could use that by carving a design in there, and you could use that to cancel your stamp. But let's not limit ourselves. There was rubber available, leather, and as some other people have said, they can also be just about any device that served the purpose of obliterating the stamp. Period of usage was in popular commons are limited to weeks and possibly months. And we're going to see how that works here in Owen Sound. The designs were similar over time. Yes and no. If Dave has come up with more than 1,000 in his book, and you have that catalog, you'll see that the designs are just incredibly there. But my focus in my collection here was just about this community that I live in, the city of Owen Sound. And size of the obliterator was thought to remain the same. And in fact, nobody's really studied it as far as I know. And if there's anybody else knows this, as far as I know, I'm the first person to look at the obliterator size to help differentiate one obliterator from the next. So, radial cancellations. So what are radial cancellations? Well, they're circular in appearance and with shapes carved in. The imagination was unlimited, so it's up to the postmaster and or designate to decide what to carve into it. And so when I started collecting Owen Sound postal history some 15 years ago, or maybe a little more than that, I didn't really set out to look at fancies. I just wondered what I could get for the postal history from this community. And lo and behold, over time, I got into the fancies. It doesn't say that the rest has dropped by the wayside. It's just that this is what I've got the exhibit and what we're speaking about today. But fancy cancels to me belong on a cover. And because it's the cover that proves where that cover came from. And another one of the sections of the regulation stated you had to give the town date name in the lower left-hand corner of the envelope, and that's for tracking purposes. Because prior to Confederation, there were complaints about the service being received from the post office, the long time between a letter being mailed and it arriving at its destination. So that was one of the reasons for why the town cancel was placed in the lower left corner, so it wouldn't be obscured by the stamp and would be clearly visible. However, although I prefer to collect them on cover, there are other collectors, quite a few actually, that just do it on stamps. And I've mentioned Dave Lascelles, and that was how he got involved in it many, many years ago. He found some cork cancels, and he fell in love with it, and that's all he ever collected. But looking into this now, looking into the Owen Sound cancellations, I looked at the radial cancellations, and I says, well, yeah, they look the same, but they're different. So I looked at the differences, and then when I looked at that, some of the popularly held beliefs about the cork cancels were just set aside. And I did this by two things. I looked at the size and the design itself, and the size was the one that helped me differentiate between a new obliterator and the previous one. So I was challenged by some people to say, hey, Phil, why don't you make an exhibit? And I scratched my head a little bit, and I come up with, oh, well, I could do something on fancy cancels. I have enough material that would fill a frame. The current version that I have, version 3 of this exhibit, started out as a 1 frame. It's now 2. I don't think it'll expand beyond that because I think I've exhausted the supply. The odd one may appear, but the readily bunch is not there anymore. I also, just one other thing is that Dave in his book just chose fancy. He looked at designs, and there are other locally produced obliterators that don't fall into his book. And so reality, when I said Owen Sound fancy cancels, it's really Owen Sound locally produced obliterators. It's a mouthful, but that's what that's what it really comes down to. So first thing is, here's my first cover bearing a fancy cancel. And so I hope you're able to see my mouse arrow here. It's circular in shape. It's done really well, actually. It's sliced into sectors, radials, spokes, pieces of pie. And I'm not sure if there's any other descriptors you could use, but if you have something, just throw it in at the end. Anyways, in this particular case, this design has 16 radials, and that's the term I'll use when I'm dealing with this. The letter was mailed on March the 12th or 13th in 1870, and that is the earliest one that I have from Owen Sound. There are earlier ones from other communities, but again, I just focused on a particular place, the place where I live. The second cover here, now it threw the postal people in a real frenzy, because look at this. The stamp is in the lower left-hand corner, and then they have to put the town cancellation. So there it is, Owen Sound. Can't make out the date exactly here. It's the 20th of 1871, and March of 1871. And it's addressed to Philadelphia. So it opened up. Well, hold it. I have to now look at the rates. And the local cover to Toronto, the rate was 3 cents. It was a uniform rate all across the country. But in 1871, it had to cross the border with the United States. And so there was a fee for being mailed in the United States. And so that was another 3 cent stamp. So that's why we have a pair of 3 cent small queens on this particular letter. And it was addressed to Philadelphia. And I'm not sure whether you can see it or not. Depends if you have your screen, but on the far edge over here, the receiver, Mr. Morris, writes down Mrs. E.C. Cumley. Well, a little bit of research showed that her husband, Mr. Cumley, was involved in woodwork manufacturing and later in a hardware store. So it's just an interesting tie-in with the with that particular cover. This one here, the question is, are more than one obliterator being used at one time? And the answer is absolutely yes. And looking at the postmark here, June the 8th, 1870. So less than 1 month after the previous first one, here's the second one. And no question that this is a different design completely than what we just saw. Still circular, thus radial. But at the end, you can see each one is squared off, so to speak. It's a muddy cancel, because the first strike, you can see, is very weakly done. So was it lack of ink? Probably. But now we get the re-inked obliterator, and yeah, it's hard to then get all the details for this particular one. But there was, now we know, 2 obliterators used in that same year. And conjecture, debate you can have is that, well, how many people were employed in the post office? Did they each have individual obliterators? It's food for thought. Don't have an answer, just, again, food for thought. And just to say that in 1869, so that's the start of the fancy period, This town of Owen Sound had a population of approximately 3,000 people. So that's 3,000 people. Now, how many of those 3,000 are going to be writing letters? And, it certainly makes it a small database from which to accumulate. And again, I didn't realize this until I had been doing this for a while on some of the challenges of putting a collection together on this topic. Now, the radial cancellation did not remain the same. So here's the first one. And you can see that here, I hope you're able to see it, there is arrowheads. There are 8 arrowheads. And on this particular one, it is 25 millimeters in diameter. So it ties in onto the cover. So the arrowhead goes onto the cover as well as the stamp obliterating it. And thus avoiding the risk of somebody manufacturing a cover for personal gain. Here is the same design, and it shows that this particular design was used December of 1874 from October of 1873. This was used for 14 months. Now, this particular cover here is a brand new one to me. It just recently arrived in my collection very shortly, about a month or so ago. And it now extends the period of usage which I was not aware of until here. Previously, this arrowhead design was used for about 2 months, and now I've got it for over 14 months. So that really flies in the face of the assumption of a short period of usage. And again, here we go with a very neat cancellation. You can see that these are well divided. You've got much broader lines cut in, and there's 8 radials or sectors. And yeah, it was mailed May the 4th, 1875. And this one here in the bottom is 6 sectors. And it too is a different size, so I can't say that they're the same. But for anybody that's trying to compare A to B, there is a feature that you can use in PowerPoint, and that is using the ability to superimpose one on top of the other. And then you can rotate to come match up. So initially you thought maybe that they were the same and that we're just missing a couple of lines, but no, they're not. They are a different size. So it's just to keep your eyes open because you just don't know what you have. So I'm going to step now into the crossroads cancellation, and it's got a really intriguing part to it. So hang on, folks. So this is the first crossroads cover, and it was mailed May 31st, 1876. So when I look at the crossroads, look at the black markings, very thick. You've got roads here as well. It's an intersection. So you got roads crossing each other, hence the name. And I just like to call the dark lines the curbs. You'll see the reason why just in a little while. The crossroads themselves were fairly well appreciated. Note again, 1876. So this is 6 years after the first obliterator of the radial design was used. And yeah, reading here, tax receipt from Bentinck Township, which is in southern Gray County. And also you got this lovely little address here, which is a mail delivers stamp saying that's delivered this at 3 o'clock on June the 1st to the address that's given below. That's pretty good service. And you question yourself, well, how can we travel from Owen Sound to Toronto in a day? But the railroad arrived in Owen Sound in 1872. So this traveled by rail, but there are no markings from the rail car on here. Subsequent types. Well, here we go. This cover here, you can see clearly it's different. We got wider, but they're not uniform. There's a narrowing here. And also the curbs are thinner. This little shortage here, this shortage is consistent with it, and it remained that way. This I call type 2, based on its size, and I don't want to bore you all with the sizes, but it just helps you to look and categorize your stamps. Mr. Carpenter in Collingwood, Ontario. Now that's a distance of about 50 miles or 75, 80 kilometers. And Mr. Carpenter, from other correspondence, was called a chemist. We would call him a druggist or a pharmacy, and he supplied stuff. And so this was his comment here, that it was to David Mills, I believe is that, but Milnes. Anyways, it's that's more research if you want to get into the postal history of that particular letter. Here comes another one. Again, just look at the crossroads. You've got a very narrow crossroads now. You've got a narrowing here, much more pronounced than on the previous one. And the interesting thing is the fact that it's a registered letter. And so here we have a registered letter stamp with a hammer cancel on it, hammer canceled here, and then the number 6411. That is most likely put on in Toronto for the records to say that this was the 6,411th registered letter that had arrived in Toronto in April of 78, I think. And then I get what's called problem child covers. So here's the first one. And this was a online purchase from one of our favorite online sites. I shan't mention names here, but I looked at this and I saw, oh, hey, 6 cents for the stamps. Well, that's a double rate letter, so 1 ounce. But then you look at the registered and you say, well, that doesn't make sense, because to register a letter, you paid a fee of 2 cents. So where's that other 2 cent stamp? Well, it is or was located here. And I'm not sure how good your view is, but there's a little bit of yellow residue here. And I just attribute that to being the gum, and that perhaps somewhere in the years between its mailing in 1878 and its arrival in my home, that stamp came off. Did it get wet? Was it done intentionally? That's open for debate. So in an exhibition purpose, this particular cover is a problem child because it is not perfect. The cover itself is in good shape, but the fact that you've got one missing stamp here makes it a problem child for an exhibit. The next problem child is the very same cancellation, but on this one, you can see it's there, nicely done. But if you look at it, you're going to see that here is a tear, and that tear occurred on the opening of the envelope. And yeah, that's considered to be a problem child in the world of exhibiting. Now, having said that, this was in my exhibit, my 3rd version, and I expect it will be in the 4th version. Not to challenge anyone, but it is the fact that that is different. The cancellation is different than the previous ones you've seen. And also the fact that these are the only 2 that I have. If in the future I may come across another cancellation, I can replace one or both of these letters as seen fit. But this is what I got. So I did identify it, and it is important that if you're going to do an exhibit, that in your synopsis, identify it for what it is and say, but these are the redeeming qualities for it. They're the only known ones. So you have a rarity factor, and generally speaking, it should be accepted as, okay, yes, it's less than perfect, but we can accept it for what it is. And you can see here, I call this my pride and joy. And the reason why, well, I bought this at a show. Um, my memory says it was in Canpax in Toronto in 2022, and I knew it was different. So lo and behold, yeah, I made a point of buying it. November the 11th, 1878. So there we go. The reason it's different is the crossroads. They cross here at an angle of 70 degrees. Well, that's different. And so, yeah, that was exciting. Well, that was the first dealer I visited. I visited other dealers, and lo and behold, I got more. So when I reported this to Dave Lascelles as a new discovery, he said, "Well, it's just a twisting of the previous cancels that have been applied, and it's really not a new cover." Then, but I replied back as well, "Yes, it is, but I've also got 4 others with the same cancellation, and that start from 1878 and go into 1879, March of 1879. So we've got a 5-month period that this was in use." So my pride and joy is I've got it. I'm the discoverer of this new cancellation, and it's unique in what it is. All right, now we got to change. Still considered to be a crossroads by Mr. Lascelles, and you can see that the roads here cross each other at 90 degrees, but we don't have curbs. We have fields on each side of the roads. So I thought, okay, the other difference is that the ink being used is now blue, not black, as all the previous ones you've looked at. And you can see that the date is 1882. So there's quite a gap actually between the last one in 1880 and this first one in 1882. And I believe it's January the 19th. And you're going to say, well, why are there no letters in that period from 1881, the year 1881? I don't have a precise answer for that, but I can suggest to you that the first postmaster was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Francis. He died in September of 1880, and so we have covers up to that point. The new postmaster that took over, Mr. Crawford, took over in November of 1880. And it must have taken him some time to say, okay, we will, work our way into doing this. And as he did so, the use of the obliterators may have just dropped off. However, this shows that there is a change, that we have 2 different postmasters now in the period of study for this particular city. I find that this is just intriguing, and then you still have the same terminology, but completely different designs. This happens to be the last cover with that I have in my collection bearing a fancy cancel. Again, crossroads design, much larger than the previous ones, and it's using black ink. So you wonder, did some message come back to Mr. Crawford about using black ink instead of blue? that remains to be seen, but it's just further investigation at this point. And although it's quite a little bit out of order in chronological sense, it just keeps them together in the sense of the designs. And so we're going to go into looking at the intersecting lines. And first thing is, this is not considered to be a fancy example by Dave Lascelles. He looks at the design. I have in my study shown that this is still a locally produced obliterator, and I feel it's part of the study. And here it is. This is the first one. So the date of this particular letter is 1879. And you could see that you've got 2 verticals, 3, possibly 4. I don't know whether that is a 4th one or not. But that's the first one that I have that is bearing this new design. Nicely done. All the parts are there. I would suggest to you that this may have been a wood obliterator because of the the spaces. And here is the later version of it. And this last version is pretty well worn out. It's battered. And it was used for a period of 1 year. And over that year, it just deteriorated. Chunks disappeared. But how I observed that they were together is this square matches here, and this matches there. Again, I used it by in PowerPoint, superimposing this image over top of this image, and the lines fit in nicely. So I could say, yeah, that they are the same design, and then that gives me a period of usage. Here's a second crossroads example, and it's circular, perhaps oval in shape. And what that is that the well done here, and note the time, December of 82, so that's still at the very beginning of Mr. Crawford's tenure as postmaster, and we will see that that is kept on going. But his version of intersecting lines was completely different than his predecessors was. Were they aware of what each did? That's the unknown thing. Couldn't tell you. And this is not quite the last one, but it shows what I would like to explain to you is that these deteriorated, and I'm sure the wood started to give way. You can see cracks here, and some of it's worn off. So it's there. Again, we have a delivery mark from the mailman in Toronto, 8 a.m. on July the 11th, and it was mailed on July the 10th. So that's good service. Miscellaneous cancellations. Well, these are things that just don't fit. And so the first one is, I call this a lonely radial design. Of all the previous designs, the black was much more than this particular design. And it's the only example of that particular one. So what I mean to say is that now I'm still searching every show, looking for, is there another one that fits into this category? And maybe, somebody will see it and say, hey, Phil, check out so-and-so. And that's the great part of being in this, being part of the RPSC, BNAPS, etc. The philatelic community is a wonderful place of people helping each other. And I appreciate everyone that has done that in my path. This here is another orphan, as I could call it. It's the only one, and don't know where it came from. I know where I purchased it, but to say where it is this a radial design? For about 3/4 of this, you can say that this is a circle. But then you've got this quarter up here, and you're going to say, well, what is that? Is that a crossroads? Could that be a flag? And it came to my imagination that perhaps it could be the Scottish flag, which was a blue field and a white cross or X through the flag. Check it out sometime. See if you think that that might, in your opinion, would that be a flag? Anyways, it's just it's a question mark, and it's interesting. And yes, it's looking for a partner. So some conclusions from what I've learned about being a postal history collector. First off, I really, to do justice to fancy cancellations, you should have these on cover because the key thing, it demonstrates that the obliterator is from a community, whether that is Ottawa, Toronto, Victoria. The obliterator was wonderful, but the where it came from, so you can cross match, is really the important thing. Next, the design alone doesn't help identify the differences in the obliterators. Size of the cancel is an important factor. And as I said earlier, as far as I know, I'm the first person to have done that. I'm quite humbled to admit if somebody has done it before I have done so. Radio designs were used for an 8-year period, and it was all under the supervision of Postmaster Francis, one gentleman. So he was there. And in retrospect, about 2/3 of my fancy covers are from this period, from 1870 until 1880. And the remaining 1/3 comes from Mr. Crawford's tenure as the postmaster. Again, the crossroads design shows the concepts of two different postmasters, and that itself, I think, is just interesting. Watch out. Why did it change? And when I went online and the Library and Archives Canada to see who the postmasters were, that's where I discovered that we had to change between the one postmaster and the next. Again, just due to the death of Mr. Francis. And there are time gaps between covers, which makes it really difficult to get an accurate look, but it gives you an idea. And I believe here that Owen Sound, being a smaller community, didn't have a lot of mail. And it means that, to me, we have potentially much longer period of use for one obliterator. And I can understand in the larger communities where you had many hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of mail passing through, the obliterator had a very short lifespan. But here in Owen Sound, no, it did last much longer than that. In 1881, the census of that year provided that the population had gone from 3,000 to about 4,700 people in 1881. So we have a 50% increase basically over that 15-year period. And the number of letters would have increased. It just doesn't reflect that way in my collection. And the last part here, I really encourage everybody. Exhibiting makes a collector into a postal historian. And what you got to do is just have to learn and dig. Don't be in a hurry. Just be satisfied that you found something out. And I'm going to say last night, I was just digging away. This is last night in prep for this today. um, I have got many covers addressed to a Mrs. Sheriff Flintoff in Sarnia, mailed from Owen Sound, and many letters. And I thought, why? Why? What's the connection? So I did, and last night I was successful. I found the obituary from James Flintoff, Sheriff of Sarnia, and his wife was Catherine Goodson, who had a family here in Owen Sound. And so I got more research to do that. But one of the covers that I showed earlier was addressed to Miss Goodson in Sarnia. And later on, she then married the sheriff, and that's where it is. In summary, searching through the Owen Sound fancies showed just a great number of obliterators, over 20 that were used in here. History is never ending, and as more information becomes available online, the better it is. And you can really add to your collection and knowledge and share that with others. And my advice is find a topic that really interests you and just go for it. See with what you get. I can't give an answer for what you'll get, but if you look for it, you just don't know what there is. And so at this point, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for your time. And I hope that you found this informative.
Well, thank you, Phil. Can I get you to stop your share? And it was great. I've always been fascinated by the fancy cancels. They're a very, very cool thing to study. We do have a few minutes to take a few questions if anybody wants to ask anything of Phil. Now, you have to unmute yourself, remember, but if you do have some questions, please unmute.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for your sharing. Interesting session. Can you tell us a little bit about were they all corks, or what were they made out of again? Can you share that? Was there any differences, or were they all the same material?
Uh, Strangely, they're not. None of them are really have been found, Sid. So it's hard to say. I'm suggesting that cork would have been the original ones that we started with, and it's just that you had other materials, and as I pointed out to some of those, intersecting lines, I'm pretty sure that that was made out of wood, just simply by the grain in the there. Um,
I know
I also
some of the
uh,
ones in Toronto had like a fabric around them sometimes to so that the I guess ink so it would last longer and keep it more intact. Did you find evidence of any of that? Any kind of a fabric pattern on the cork itself on the
no, no. I've heard that where they use tape around the edges to make sure that it didn't splay out. Um, so, anyways, as I said, I didn't find anything of that. Um, I hope to dig some more out in connections with the Grey Roots Museum, and but at the moment, I can't say that. I really do believe that the some of the uh, Crossroads designs were made out of rubber because they just stayed so resilient. So rubber, wood, cork would have been to me the prime tools, mediums used to create the design.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one last question if anybody has anything for Phil. No? Okay, well, thank you very much. And Phil, that was terrific. As I said, I've always been fascinated by the fancy cancels. So I am going to stop my recording here now.